Philip, hello, China from Los Angeles. It's great to see you again.
Thanks, Mark. Good to see you again after all these years.
I know, well, never say never. Good relationships hopefully keep on, and I'm glad that we reconnected, and it's good to hear that you're doing well and everything. And I appreciate you participating in this leadership series because I know you've got a lot to offer of insight and experience. Not to put more pressure on you in this, but I know you do. So, how
Thank
about
you.
we start, Philip? If you could just give everybody your name, what you're doing now, just a little mini brief history of who you are.
Okay. Philip Beck. I'm an Australian that's been living in China for the last 9 years. The first two-thirds of my career were in the advertising and marketing industries as a media person, and then I got into recruitment with a business called Monster.com and came to China in 2005 to get back into the advertising industry, but more importantly, to get to China. And it's where I hope to stay for at least the next 10 years because it's such an incredibly dynamic market compared to my homeland of Australia, which is very, very quiet. I often tell people Australia's population lives in Beijing.
Well, as I mentioned, we have a fairly growing Australian population here in Los Angeles too, and I will give high marks to Australia for certainly one of many, but one of them is innovative people come out of Australia.
Probably because we're so small and we have to do so many different things in a working environment. We don't
Well,
have the luxury of a whole suite of people that we can call on without it costing a lot of money.
Well, there you go. Whatever the reason, it seems to be working. And interestingly enough, we met in Beijing a few years ago, and we've kind of have not totally similar backgrounds, but we have overlap of type of backgrounds. So I think could be real cool what we're doing here. So again, I thank you, and let's hit
Okay.
it. Um,
Alrighty.
so the first thing I want to ask you is pretty simple. It could be a long answer, but we're going to look for the briefer than long answer. What is, with all your experience, international, different cultures, different industries, how do you define, or more importantly, what's your perspective of leadership?
I think the core thing for me on leadership is someone who can create a compelling story that other people are willing to follow and buy into. So,
Uh,
other people might use the word vision, mission statement, but at the end of the day, there's something compelling about what they want to do that other people go, yes, I want to be a part of that. Because still there's a lot of people who want to be a follower rather than a leader, and they'll follow those people that they believe in, trust in, and more importantly, want to be a part of what that person wants to build and create.
Yeah, and as you may remember or see on our website, I compare a lot of things to sports because I think there's a lot of comparison, and I know we were chatting just recently. You were playing a sport I'd never heard of recently. Can you just quickly tell everybody what that is again?
I was playing burn ball in Sweden, which is the equivalent of playing baseball in the ocean. So you have four bases and you run in about a meter of water. But I should have learned to do some warm-up exercises before playing it instead of tearing a muscle after, running off to first base.
Well, but you were being a leader, right?
I was being a leader, yeah, I was the first one off. Not a good example there.
Oh no. Well, you're an entrepreneur. We talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and game changers, and that takes special type of leadership. How have you determined what the right leadership that's needed for an entrepreneur, and maybe what's similar or distinct from a large corporate business leader or even a sports organization?
I think the key thing is, having come from a large corporate where most of my life was, and then becoming an entrepreneur, there's a couple of things. One is you don't have the large resources available to you as an entrepreneur. So you've got to be willing to get in and get your hands dirty, number one. And also, I think to be an entrepreneur, you've got to be somewhat of a rebel um, and a bit of a rule breaker because, you are sort of going into new territories that perhaps, or new sectors that a lot of people have not been in before. So, rule breaker, brave, be willing to, keep pushing through the pain barrier that will often face entrepreneurs. And I like what you said about, sport before, because it's never easy and you've got a lot of competition. And just like in a good sporting game, you may not always win. So you've got to learn from your mistakes, pick yourself up really quickly, gather your team around you and go, let's go again. So,
I think
yeah,
that's
courage. Yeah,
yeah.
courage is probably another one.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to interrupt, and I love what you say there because we do compare a lot of things to sports, and we talk about you've got to commit and be aligned and all those wonderful cliches to win championships, but you can't always necessarily win the championship, but you can have consistent winning seasons, and I think a business can be very much like that, right? Is aim for consistent winning seasons.
Yeah, and constantly looking at how you're doing things. Everyone uses the word agile, but just being very quick to go, that didn't work. What do we do now? Because you don't have the luxury of time.
Yeah, that's for
You've got to
sure, and
respond really quickly.
yes, especially these days. You're right
You know,
on the
like
money.
and in a lot of sports, apart from maybe American football, you can't sort of call time out.
Yes.
You've just got to keep going
Well,
and
as
respond.
I grew up playing hockey and still do. And then when we weren't playing hockey, they told us to play soccer, at least the American term soccer. And you got to be moving all the time.
Absolutely, yeah. And someone once said to me when I first came to China, Philip, if you don't make a decision, you'll get run over by your competition because 1 year here is like 7 years in any other country.
That's
So,
a, that's
yeah.
actually That's amazing. How have you found to sideline a little bit? How have you, or what have you found so exciting about being in China per se? And you're in Beijing, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus Australia, U.S., etc.
It's just the pace of the market. Everything moves so quickly. Everything is still growing incredibly quickly. So you have to make decisions. Yeah, and if you come up with any good idea, you know that there's another 1.3 billion eyes looking at what you've done and going, "Oh, I could do that, and I could do that better."
Right.
So the competition is intense, and you just have to run quickly, respond quickly, and keep trying to innovate as quickly as you can. Someone once compared Baidu, which is the Google of China, and I think last year they were 1,000 times more innovative than Google in 1 year. So it's an insane, crazy market, which I love
Yeah,
because of that.
and what you say there is right on the money. I think for leaders too. Leaders have to thrive on that intensity and even pressure, so that it in a way it almost isn't pressure. They're playmakers. They love it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So let me ask you then, with that respect to that, a lot of times I see, because we work with large companies, small companies, startups, and startups are obviously when the founders of the startups get funded, it's a celebration, it's exciting, which it should be. But I've also heard from a lot of private equity people, and I've seen it myself. That's when it just really begins, and when you have to actually scale up and make it work. Correct?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, and the funding's never over because you typically go through a series of funding. So you're constantly pitching to investors. The work is not over, and you have to scale up because you've got to deliver on what you promised. You might have to pivot a couple of times because your original intentions are not working out. So you've got to make sure that you enlist the support of your investor that you did have along the way, so that they continue to support you not only directly but indirectly in the market when you go to raise again. So yeah, the whole pitch process is never over, not at least for 4 to 5 years.
Do you find any difference in being a successful leader with respect to different culture, different language, different interpretations, things of that nature?
What I've found is that across all cultures, I think one of the key things that at least I've experienced for myself is if you show that you care for people and that you trust them and that you believe in them, and that you will do everything you can to help them be better for themselves. That for me works in every single country, at least across Asia, that I've been involved with. But yeah, trust, care, and almost serving them so that they become the heroes and make you look good. Makes your job a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliant. I hear that all the time with executives asking me, well, how do I see if these guys really are leaders? And the big word usually comes up trust, and sometimes it's even love. They say care, sometimes
Mm,
even love, and which is amazing. It's simple, but not necessarily easy, and to do that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's a great point. How do you then it kind of segues into creating a winning culture? And again, you've been in big corporations where you could have hundreds of people in your organization, and you can be in a startup where you got 5 to 10 to 20 or whatever. How do you create a winning culture?
I think, and again, you'd know more from this from your sporting days and playing hockey, but it's building a team that believes in themselves, believes in the team, and more importantly, believes they can win. And everything you can do to encourage the individual and encourage the team to win and look at, okay, what do we have to do to win? And sometimes we might get beaten, but what do we learn from getting beaten so that we can then go forward much smarter and win again? And you might get beaten, a couple of times along the way, but it's through all of it encouraging people. It's really easy to, you know, be discouraging, but it doesn't help. Yelling at people doesn't help them.
Yeah, I
It's
agree. And in fact, I saw a story not a while back about I believe it was the CEO, female CEO of Spanx. I believe it was her, the CEO of Cinnabon. I think it was Spanx, that she said every time she went home when she was younger and had dinner at the table with her dad would ask you, "So what did you tell me all the things you failed at today?" And but it wasn't a negative, you're a failure. It was, okay, let's figure out what you learned from it and move forward. It turned into a positive discussion about failures, if you will.
Yeah, totally.
It's brilliant.
And one of my early lessons in life when I first started working was, I made a monumental screw up in my company as a junior, and I should have been fired. And the managing director at the time said to me, "So what have you learned from your mistake, Philip?" And I went through what I'd learned, and he said, "Will you repeat it again?" And I went, "No." And he said, "Okay, you're still here." He said, "The rest of the people out there think I should fire you, so you need to win back their respect. But if you tell me you've learned from this lesson, you can still stay here."
Well, you know what? Aside from giving you incentive, that's actually a better return on their investment than letting you go.
Yeah, yeah, it was. I hope. Yeah, no,
Yeah, for you
actually,
and them.
yeah, yeah, totally.
Hey, you've also had a lot of experience in media, and you obviously know a lot about social media. I heard this the other day where an executive was saying, it used to be, Mark, where I could have a meeting in my office, bring people in, we'd have a direct, straightforward conversation, work things out. He says, now I have a meeting like that, and before the meeting's over, it's already on Twitter.
Nothing's a secret.
Nothing. Which is good to some degree, but
Yep.
tell me your thoughts on that. I mean, it clearly, social media clearly has a huge effect on business owners, business leaders, management on how they act. No?
Yeah, totally. And I think, from my years in advertising and before I got into recruitment, we were talking about how digital media and social media would, pretty much almost force people to start building a personal brand. And those people that still shy away from social media really don't understand that at the end of the day, as an individual, they're also a brand. And like any brand, a brand has values for what it stands for. And people want to see, what's Mark's values? What does he stand for? What are the sort of things that he does? And then they can determine whether they, buy into that or not.
So, as a leader of a business like yourself, how I know it's probably a long answer, but you've almost got to develop your brand with your people, your brand out there on social media, and as a result, one thing I like to say all the time is people hire people and people join people. A company doesn't hire you. Um, how do you develop? Are those aligned brands, or how do you do that?
Just make sure, and whatever you do, wherever that is, that it's in line with your own personal values.
Mm,
Number one, and then different things for different people. But for me, it's just the way in which I reach out to people, whether that's on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. Personally, I like to do things that help people. So most of the time, what I focus on is things that help other people. That's sort of my personal brand, I suppose.
that's a good brand to have. In all seriousness, that's the best brand to have. And it's interesting with all the fighting and crap, if I can call that, going on in the world today. It's amazing. We're almost fighting. Obviously, they're fighting social media wars while they're fighting the war.
Yeah, totally. And
It's
wasting a lot of energy in the process.
a good point. If we could all concentrate that energy on something more fruitful, it'd be wonderful. Tell me,
Yeah.
with again all your experiences, like all of us, you must have had one or two, if not more, but one or two major influencers on your career, if not your life. Can you tell us about one or a couple?
Yeah, the most influential person has been a guy called Peter Irvine. And Peter was my boss for the first 14 years of my career. And he's currently the co-founder of a coffee franchise called Gloria Jean's Coffees.
Of course.
And when he started the business in Australia back in 1995, the media at the time said, you're going to get smashed by Starbucks. And he's an incredibly humble man because he'd left the advertising industry to start Gloria Jeans. And he said, I will just let the customer decide whether they like my store or not. And now he's got more than 470 stores in Australia, and Starbucks, I think, has 17. But
That's unbelievable.
Peter was one of the most influential people in advertising in Australia. And that's a egotistical, cutthroat industry, if you watch Mad Men.
Yep.
But Peter was probably the most humble person, and still is the most humble person I've ever met. And he just focused on making everybody that worked with him a hero. And there are a lot of people in the business in Australia that owe their success to him, just as I do. And the second person that's had the most influence on my life is a guy called Jim Tracy. And Jim used to be the worldwide COO for TMP, which owned and operated Monster.com and what is now Hudson
Sure.
Recruiting. And even though Jim got jailed a few years ago for backdating share options, he was released. The SEC was on a bit of a mission to get him, but he was released after 2 years because of the number of people that just objected to what had happened. And he's out now and served his time. But despite that, he's been an incredibly influential person on me in terms of the commercial side of running a business. And even though he got, sentenced for the backdating of options, he's a person that's always told the truth and, has incredible integrity.
Those are unique answers. Usually, a lot of times I'll get the usual expected ones. On another aspect, this is a question you've probably heard before. I like to ask people, who's a leader they've admired most? That quote unquote, if you could have dinner with someone past or present, who would it be? So who would it be?
It'd still be Peter and Jim.
Oh, there you go. Great. Are you buying?
I'd be buying, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yep.
Not too personal question, but a few personal questions just to complete and get to know you a little bit better. Do you have a favorite sport? And don't tell me burn ball.
My favourite sport is rugby union.
Ah, there's a sport
Only,
that's a little bit rougher than most. How about do you have a favorite, live show, movie, or TV show?
Wow, that's tough. My favorite would be Persons of Interest.
Oh wow, good choice. Very interesting. Do you have a favorite type of music that you enjoy?
Yeah, heavy metal.
Ah, my son was in a movie called Hesher, where they used Metallica for the theme
Oh,
of the
okay.
movie.
Right.
So I'll have to tell you about that movie. And what about food? Favorite food?
Favorite food is a type of food in China called Sichuan. It's quite spicy food, but yeah, that would be my favorite.
And tell us what that is.
Essentially, it's just say Chinese food as you know it, but cooked in a lot of spices, particularly chili. So yeah, and it comes in varying grades of spiciness. Some that will, make you cry, break out in a sweat, have a red face, but it's very, very nice.
So it's an emotional food.
It's an emotional food, yeah.
Hey, this is great. Thank you so much for your time and your perspectives, which are unique and fun. And I certainly hope to be chatting with you again on a different subject sometime in the near future.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark.
My pleasure.